Southwestern Family of Companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, our diversely and amazingly accomplished guests share their insights and inspirations to help us ignite our own. So let's invest attention together to breathe, to reflect and refocus, and decisively defeat that voice we call Mr. Mediocrity. Then let's enjoy moving forward to make a positive difference in our world. Privileged to be your host, this is Dan Moore.
This week, Dan Moore interviews John Mitchell. John is a serial entrepreneur who created the top practical application in the world from the legendary book, Think and Grow Rich. When he applied his 12-minute-a-day technique to his own life, he saw his income go to over $5 million a year after 20 years of earning low six figures. It also made him laser-focused every day on only the 2 to 3 things that move the needle in his business. The science behind his technique was profiled in a Time magazine cover story. His goal is to transform the lives of high achievers. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the Action Catalyst, everyone. We are delighted today to be spending time with John Mitchell. One thing I can tell you in advance is that John is committed to lifelong growth and not the kind of person that'll be satisfied with where he is when he knows he could be someplace even greater. So, John, thank you so much for being with us on the Action Catalyst.
Hey, Dan, so glad to be here.
Good. Well, I know you've had a lot of entrepreneurial experiences at the beginning of your career, but then you hit a point sort of at around 50, as you describe it, where you just weren't satisfied despite the fact you'd had these businesses going. You weren't hitting the level of success that you wanted to hit. What were some of the challenges that maybe caused that to happen, where you weren't as successful as you wanted to be, and the realizations that came after that?
Well, great question. Do you mind if I share with you basically what I discovered at 50?
Yes, please.
Well, you know, I started out as a CPA and became an entrepreneur when I was 30. But when I turned 50, I just saw that I wasn't as successful as I thought I should be. And Dan, I really had 2 goals in my life: to make enough money so I didn't have to work, and to find the woman of my dreams. And at 50, unfortunately, I felt like I was falling short on both of them. And as an entrepreneur, you know, I always did pretty well. I always made 6 figures a year, but unfortunately, it was low 6 figures a year. And on the girl at 50, I'd never been married, although it wasn't from lack of interviewing. I did a lot of interviewing. But really, you know, I found that the defining moment happened maybe 3 days after I turned 50. I realized that if I didn't start making over $1 million a year, I would never have the exceptional life that I always had dreamed of. And it wasn't so much about the money as much as it was about that freedom. And sure, I wanted the nice lifestyle, but more than anything, I wanted freedom and that sense of accomplishment. And so I really came to realize that hard work doesn't work. You know, while it works for making 6 figures a year, it doesn't work for making 7. And I absolutely knew there had to be something else. And I was pretty darn determined to figure out whatever that something else was. And so, I don't know, I'm at 50, I'm searching, what is it? And then probably 3 months in to being 50, a pearl of wisdom hits me. You know, why not go find the top book in the world on success and achievement ever written, and then take that book and apply it literally word for word to my life? And so I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense logically. And so after some research, I found that there is actually one book that exceeds all others, and it's Think and Grow Rich. Dan, are you familiar with Think and Grow Rich?
Certainly am, Mr. Napoleon Hill.
Right. Well, you know, there's a couple of things that are significant that most people don't realize. First, this book has sold over 100 million copies worldwide, whereas the next best-selling book on success has sold less than 10 million. So it's the top book by a factor of 10. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that most people don't realize is that more millionaires and billionaires have been created from this one book than any other book on the planet. And so of course, I'm like, well, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And so I read it, and the central concept of the book is what you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And let me say that again. What you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And so then I discovered a problem, though. There wasn't a practical way to apply that idea to my life in a practical way. And so, I don't know, for a couple of weeks, I probably moped around and thought, well, I don't know how to apply it. And then it hit me, hey, I got to figure out the way. I mean, I'm 50. I'm not going to go find a better book, man up and figure out how to apply it. And that led to creating a 12-minute a day mental technique that over 9 years I continually tweaked. And over that time, I saw my income go from low 6 figures a year to over $5 million a year. And of course, I felt so incredibly blessed. It was like a 25-time increase over what had been over the prior 20 years. And really, the cool thing was I could see why it was happening. I could feel it. And I saw that by applying science to my life, really for the first time ever, I was influencing my daily actions and thoughts. And that was so impactful. And I also met the woman of my dreams from doing this. And so to wrap this up, this experience really changed me as an entrepreneur. And I became fascinated by how you could take two key scientific principles and apply them to a person's life and so materially impact your success and achievement in life. And that became so fascinating to me. I sold my company, and I ended up meeting the chancellor and president at the University of Texas. And I shared with him my story, and he says, hey, you got to teach this at the University of Texas, and why don't we teach it together? And so that's what I do, but my real passion is teaching it to entrepreneurs who are just like me, struggling, making 6 figures a year, but want to transition to 7.
That is absolutely incredible. Well, tell me a bit exactly how the 12-minute a day methodology works and how that plays out in your life and for others.
Well, before I give you all the details of it, I think one of the things that your audience may find interesting is that this is what I experienced when I was turning 50, was that as I would start learning this and talking to people, I found that only 1 in 6 people even had heard of the book Think and Grow Rich, and only 1 in 100 had knew its central concept. Yet everybody wants to be more successful. I mean, do you find that interesting?
It is interesting, yeah.
I mean, most people don't realize there's one book on success that's 10 times greater than any other book, and I think that just reflects the clutter we have in modern society. But and I think it also raises the issue, well, if 100 million people read the book, why aren't there 100 million wildly successful people, right?
Yeah.
Well, and here's what's interesting, Dan. In the book, it says, on page 1, it says, there's a secret to creating success, but I'm only going to give you half of the secret. It's on you to figure out the other half. Well, that's a problem in today's society. People aren't going to dig. I had to dig for it. I didn't see it. I read the book when I was 41 and I didn't see it. But when I was 50, I felt that pressure to really dig in and figure out, what that secret was. And so that was the first thing that was sort of significant. And the second one, and I think this is natural when you turn 50, you're going to evaluate your life. And so I stepped back and I thought, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would I evaluate each area of my life on, like, career, and this is probably a good thing for your audience to do. Just think, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you evaluate your career based on your actual earnings, maybe over the last 3 years? And then think, okay, how would I rate my romantic relationship, scale of 1 to 10, or that side of my life? And then lastly, scale of 1 to 10, how am I at controlling my health and appearance? And when I did that at 50, it was so impactful to make me see the problem vividly. Does that make sense?
It does. But you had the courage to do that self-assessment. And a lot of people don't take the time and the effort or the honesty to dig in the way that you did.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because it reveals some painful results. And it means there's going to be a lot of uphill climbs to get out of where they are. And so people don't put in the effort.
Well, you make a good point, because I realized at 50, obviously the solution wasn't in my head, because if it was, I'd already have implemented it. And so that was the power of, finding the top book in the world. And so that was really impactful. And one of the things I realized as I started digging into this is that there's a problem that all of us have that we fundamentally have to overcome. And it's that we're all using an antiquated operating system to run our lives. And what I mean by that is that we are innately geared to be geared to survival. And the impact of that is basically 3 negative things. First, it causes 90% of your thoughts to be fear-based. And secondly, you have less than 20% control over yourself. And third, you're reactive rather than proactive on your important agenda. And all that makes sense, Dan, if if you're running from lions. But it's exactly the opposite of the way you need to be if you want to be productive, creative, and happy. And that's the power of this 12-minute-a-day mental technique that I'm going to teach your audience.
Well, I tell you what, I'm looking forward to learning that. So please fire away, because we want to run. We don't want to run from lions. We want lions to run from us.
Right. Well, and here's sort of the before I explain in detail how it works. Over the last 20 years, there's been an intense interest in the scientific community as to what makes the mega achievers different than everybody else. And Dan, it comes down to 2 things: control of self and focus. Well, those are exactly the 2 things this mental technique addresses. And it sort of comes down to the fact that your success in each area of your life comes down to your everyday actions, which are driven by your everyday thoughts. And that really eliminates why this is different than everything else in the success business, because everything else is strategies, and oftentimes very good strategies. But as well as I do, we got strategies coming out of our ears. What we need is to cause great strategies to show up in our everyday thoughts and actions, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And so that's what makes this different. And here's exactly how it works. So we would take your life and compress it down to 1 sheet of paper, front and back. Now, keep in mind, we're applying, the central concept of the top book in the world, and the central concept is, again, what you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. So we take your life, compress it down to 1 sheet of paper, front and back. On the front is the ideal you in the 5 key areas of your life: yourself, your health, your romantic relationship, your spirituality, and your career. So ideal you on the front in those 5 areas. Then on the back, the improvements you want in each of those 5 areas, along with your top 3 goals for the quarter. And then on the bottom, we're going to measure the 4 or 5 key behaviors associated with those goals. And so basically, you feed this to yourself each day. It takes 12 minutes a day. And after 21 days, that's when the magic happens. That's when the science kicks in. And what you're feeding yourself starts to show up automatically without thinking in your thoughts and actions. And that's the power of this. What this really is applying science to your life to up your success. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, because it does take time to form a new habit and to convince our subconscious that we're not the same person we were before.
Right. I mean, I sort of think, I mean, I'm curious to see what you think, but it's just common sense that if you fed exactly the person you want to be, exactly what you want to accomplish, and precisely how you're going to achieve your clearly defined goals, if you fed that to yourself every day, of course that's going to affect your daily thoughts and actions. I mean, how could it not? And I think that's, besides all the power of the science, and the science was profiled on the cover of Time magazine, but just pure common sense tells you that if you did that, it would be truly impactful. And I'll give you an example of how it happens. As I mentioned, I didn't get married until I was 50, or in my 50s, and one of the things I discovered was that every once in a while your spouse will say something irritating. Have you ever experienced that?
I've only been married for 42 years. It's never happened once.
Wow. Well, being the rookie to marriage, I didn't know that happened. But when it did, I thought, man, it was so hard to get someone to marry me. I darn sure don't want to run her off. And so I thought, I thought, I want to be flexible, patient, and thoughtful. That's what I want to be. And so I started feeding that to myself every day. And after about 15 days in, nothing. Dan, I mean, I wasn't any more flexible, patient, or thoughtful 15 days in than I was when I started, that despite the fact reading it every day. But about the 21st day or 22nd day, Ginger says something irritating. And I'm telling you, Dan, in that moment, I was flexible, patient, and thoughtful. I didn't have to think about it. That's who I had become. And when that happened, it was like, wow, now I see the power of this. It's like almost a light bulb going on. And it took, basically 21 days. And the reason it didn't work 15 days in is because the subconscious mind thought that programming was going away. But once it realized that programming was not going away, then it fed it up to my conscious mind automatically without thinking. And that was the magic of it, really.
Right. Now, John, do you find that a lot of people get to that 14 or 15-day point and they conclude this stuff just doesn't work, and they stop just a few feet short of it actually happening?
That's a great question. I do not find that, because anybody that does my program, I have a pretty extensive program, and I teach them, here's how it works, and this is probably a good time to share why that works.
Okay.
This is sort of the science behind it. So here's how the human mind basically works. The conscious mind sets your intention and is influenced by logic. The subconscious mind controls your everyday thoughts and ongoing actions, and it's influenced only by repetition. And I'll give you an example of this. Let's say you want to lose weight. Well, the conscious mind sets the intention to lose weight based on the logic of the health benefits. But the reason people aren't losing weight is not from lack of intention. It's from lack of influencing what they eat and exercising, their daily actions and thoughts. And keep in mind, their daily actions are driven by their thoughts. And so, and the subconscious mind is only influenced by repetition. Logic doesn't matter at all to the subconscious mind, and that's sort of the fundamental idea that people need to grasp, is that, oh, I see, my daily thoughts and actions are only influenced by repetition. So it doesn't matter how hard I press the logic, it's that daily repetition of this 12-minute a day mental technique that drives that repetition home, and that's the science, being applied to your life to up your success. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And when you said that a lot of people lack focus and they lack the discipline, it means that they maybe give up on this process partway through before they make those mental changes.
Well, yeah, and I'd be curious to see what you think about this. I heard a great definition of discipline just recently. It's remembering what's important, what actions are important, and why. I never thought about it like that, but what do you think about that? Does that resonate with you?
Well, it totally makes sense. It's like the old statement of, you need to care about what you want the most, not what you want at the moment.
Yeah, right. Well, and one of the things that people ask me oftentimes is, well, okay, this all sounds good, but how did your income go from 20 years, a low six figures a year, to over $5 million a year? And here's how that happens. Part of this 12-minute a day mental technique is I feed myself four things regarding my career. I'm feeding my business plan, my succinct version of my business plan, my strategy for success, the two or three things that move the needle, and the linchpin issue, whatever that issue is that takes my business from where it is today to the next level. So those four things are succinctly articulated, and I read those to myself every day. Well, three things happen. First of all, your business plan is so easy to implement because it's just so top of mind. And then secondly, you become laser focused only on what moves the needle, because you know time is your most precious commodity. And once you're feeding every day what moves the needle, all distractions fall by the wayside. And then the third thing that happened, and this was surprising, by simply feeding your strategy for success and your business plan to yourself every day, it causes those two things to evolve 20 times quicker than they ever do before. And that's because you're feeding it to your subconscious mind every day, and your subconscious mind is constantly evaluating it, tweaking it, looking for flaws in it, and I felt this momentum pulling me forward in my career in a way that it never had happened before. And it was this combination that I could just see, boy, I'm just operating mentally at a much higher plane. And I'm like, I'm playing the game of life at a much higher level simply from doing this 12-minute a day mental technique.
I think it's phenomenal what you're sharing with everybody, John.
Thank you.
And you share this with students. So how long a period of time do you generally take to explain this in detail with exercises and process? Does this take weeks or months to implement? I know you've got a wonderful book on it, so I would like to hear more about that too.
Well, here's how it sort of works. I find I teach it to students, but I find that people have to have more failure in their life to really get this, because oftentimes I tell my students, and you'll relate to this, if you do life like everybody else, you're getting an average life. Just count on it. It's pure math. And what everybody's doing is they're just putting their head down and working hard. Well, that'll produce an average to good life, but it's not going to create the exceptional life. And so this 12-minute a day technique is something that less than 1% of the population does. And so that's why I find that people a little older than in their early 20s find this so powerful, because they've now experienced that, oh, doing life like everybody else doesn't work for the exceptional life. And I see there's a lot of people that abhor the average life.
Hmm.
I sure didn't want the average life. And at 50, I'm like, I got to do something about it. But candidly, 80% of people are happy with the average life.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's someone, this is not for them.
Right. When I was a beginning book salesman at the age of 18, I was given a pamphlet called The Common Denominator of Success.
Right.
And one of the points I made in there is that the hardships of a poor living are easier to put up with than the hardships of making a better living.
Wow, that is powerful.
And people therefore get satisfied with the poorer living than they could have had, because it does take mental effort and discipline and focus, all the things you're talking about.
Right.
And
right.
life experience, a whole passel full of failures, helps you be more coachable about a change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when I created this, and this happened a few years ago, I thought, well, I'm going to go see the top expert in the world on success and show it to him and see what he thinks. And of course, it's a matter of opinion, but a lot of people think that Darren Hardy is the top expert in the world on success and achievement.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured out a way to get with him, and I spent 3 days with him and showed him what I had created, and he sort of looks at it and he goes, yeah, this is pretty good. Then he looks at it a little closer and he goes, wow, this is really good. But he says, but John, people aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day on anything to improve their success. And I said, well, Darren, how can that be? I mean, this is based on the top book of the world on success. It's applying the central concept. And he goes, hey, I know you're like that. You'll spend 12 minutes. I'll spend 12 minutes. But he says the dirty little secret of the success business is that most people will not spend 12 minutes a day on anything to impact their success. And he says, you need to go find people who are really driven people, who are determined to achieve more, where success is a necessity rather than merely a preference. And he says, to most people, success is merely just a preference. They like to be more successful, but if it doesn't happen, that's no problem. And so that was hugely enlightening to me. And he says, so many people are sleepwalking through life, and they don't realize that their life is passing them by. And then they wake up when they're 70 and go, darn, this life I wanted, I can't get now.
Mm-hmm. Which is tragic, and you're trying to avoid that tragedy by passing on something that people can do if they'll do the focus and the discipline.
Right. And the way I sort of teach this to people, I have an online course that is very thorough and fully explains how it applies to each area of your life. It also has a template that helps you compress your life down to one sheet of paper. A very, very thorough course. And as an introduction to your listeners, I have a webinar. It's a free webinar where we really get into here's the science, here's how it works, and if your listeners will go to the unfairedge.com, they can get the free webinar.
The unfairedge.com. All right.
Right.
Make a note of that. Unfairedge.com.
And I sort of look at it like, Dan, this really gives you an advantage in life. I call it the unfair edge, because I'm just telling you, it darn sure does. I mean, It really gives you an advantage. And I look at it as it's a new way of thinking, a new way of doing life. It's really a success formula. And throughout my 30s and 40s, I always was looking for that, that one thing that would be a success formula that if you did it, it assured your success. And at 50, I'm like, well, I guess it doesn't exist. Well, as it turns out, it did exist. It was just buried in the top book in the world on success. So you had to go dig for it, but it's there.
Right. And you had to get to a point of what they call inspirational dissatisfaction in a book that he co-authored with W. Clement Stone.
Right.
And unless somebody is inspired enough by their dissatisfaction, then they're probably not going to make changes.
Right. And that's why the 21-year-olds I teach oftentimes, a third of them will get it and 2/3 won't, just because they don't have enough failure in their life to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great. Can you expand a little bit on what you said before, John, about how hard work doesn't work?
Yes. I think that hard work is a given. I mean, everybody's working hard. And I think that produces an average life. And I'm a big advocate of hard work. But I saw when I was in my 30s and 40s, I was working 70 hours a week pretty consistently, and I'm making six figures a year, low six figures a year. And at 50, I'm like, well, I can't work any harder. Obviously, it creates a decent life, but it doesn't create the exceptional life. And I really came to grips with, hey, I want the exceptional life. And once I started doing this, and started the exceptional life started to come, it was way more than the money. I mean, sure, I loved the lifestyle and living in a paid-for house on Lake Austin here, but what was so powerful was the freedom now to get up every day and do whatever I want. The sense of accomplishment, and really the thing I see is that I am passionate about helping other people, because that's one of the great things about human nature. If you are blessed, and I feel like I'm blessed, you want to help other people. And I see that this is so powerful and so easy to implement, that I want to share it with the world.
Uh-huh. And it's great, which is why I Think It Be It exists in print.
Right.
How can people get hold of that? It's a wonderful book.
Well, the book is in the process, but candidly, I see the problem with books. So many people read a book and they go, well, I don't know really how to apply it. I mean, just like I did with Think and Grow Rich. And so I've got the book basically written, but I'm like, I want them to go to my webinar. I want them to take my course, which is way more powerful than a book. I'm sure I'm going to finish the book. It again comes down to just doing it. But I'm like, I'm not so sure I want to even publish it, because it takes away from what I think is the most powerful thing I have to offer.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a step-by-step process that takes repetition. So I can see where your webinar could elicit more action from people than a book.
Right. And I see that
the book, though. There's a lot in this, so please.
Yeah, I know. And I see that the biggest thing today is people feel stressed. And I was just reading, and I think Gallup did a poll and said we've never been more stressed. Our country is more stressed than any country. And I see the power of this, because stress comes from a lack of control, a sense of a lack of control. If you feel like you have control, then you don't feel stress. And so when you're creating this immense amount of intention and clarity about your life, where you're literally compressing your life down to one sheet of paper, it fits in a stand and it sits on your nightstand. You can literally then pick it up, hold it in your hand, and hold your life in one hand. That immediately gives you a sense of control over your life. Even when you walk into your bedroom and see it there, it gives you a sense of control.
That's good.
That's part of the power of it.
And it's a visual reminder that you can see
Right.
every time it's right there in front of you.
Exactly.
John, some of our listeners are are really facing tough situations now. Their business or their personal life or their health really in crisis. What would you advise somebody that is currently out of aces? They look at their hand and there's just not much there. What
Right.
would you say to that person to get back on track and regain belief?
That's a great question. I think the thing that I would say to them is, step away from your life today and just on a sheet of paper articulate what are the personal qualities you want. What do you want for your health? What do you want for your romantic relationship? What are the spiritual principles that you live by? What do you want with your career? And just get that sort of going, and also maybe what improvements would you like? Just be myopically focused on your life and what you've created and what you want to create, and just by that stepping back and objectively doing that analysis of your life. Part of that would also be appreciating what you have, whatever you feel like you're blessed with. Mm-hmm. And I think that becomes the starting point, and then it evolves to where, there's this 12-minute a day mental technique that can compress all this and can end up creating what I envision. I may not be where I want to be today, but there's a tool of that's a tangible tool, as opposed to, a strategy, which is go do this, go do that.
Mm-hmm. You're really working on change from the inside out and helping people see themselves differently, which I think is great. Wow. John, time with you flies. Is there any other final words of encouragement that you could share? Because we are living in challenging times in the country. There's a lot of polarized feelings. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of question marks about where we're headed as a nation. Any things that you could share to help people regain the balance and equilibrium and the sense that they can not only cope but thrive?
Well, you're like I am. You've been on this planet a long time, like I have, and we go through peaks and valleys. Yes, we're very acrimonious at the moment, but candidly, I think that some of that is good because it needed to happen. I don't want to see it happening going forward, but I think that when you look at the long view, this country will come back together in terms of respecting the other point of view. We're all wanting the same thing, and once we get past where we are today, it'll cycle back. In the future, it's going to come somewhere in the middle, which is probably the best place.
Mm-hmm. I'm a believer in making America again.
Right.
So,
right.
Well,
and it's the greatest country. I mean, you can make your life whatever you want it to be. And that's why I'm passionate about what I have, is because I think I have the simple tool to make that happen.
Well, you also have generosity of spirit, John, because you're willing to share this, teach it to young people, because even if they don't hear all of it, believe me, I work with young people every day. They hear enough of it that it's a difference maker. So well done to you.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing and for giving and for modeling and being exactly who you are. And we look forward to encouraging people to look for unfairedge.com and work our way through in some detail of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's theunfairedge.com.
The Unfair Edge. We're going to keep all that correct.
theunfairedge.com.
Okay. John, thank you.
Dan.
Take care in Austin. We'll see you again.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. To stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst and Twitter at Catalyst_Action. Thanks for listening. This episode is sponsored by Southwestern Coaching. Southwestern Coaching has helped over 12,000 people increase their incomes by over 25% on average. As a successful salesperson, you know the importance of increasing your sales. But sometimes you might just need a little extra push and accountability to meet your goals and grow your business. Southwestern Coaching will help you increase your income through one-on-one sales and leadership coaching tailored specifically to your needs. Together, we will elevate sales. To schedule your free one-on-one business action planning session with a Southwestern coach, go to www.southwesternconsulting.com/action catalyst.